Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast. Presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh of MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is Mr. Chris Porter. He's, what would you say, Chris, one of the OGs?
Man, I guess at this point, there's definitely some real OGs out there, but yeah, I started back in like 07, I think.
Been around doing it for a long time. It's great to have you, Chris. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
All right, doing good, man. Honored to be here. Well, hopefully I'm somewhat interesting.
Oh, yeah. I think, people, we kind of talked about it on Facebook, on my personal Facebook, but, a lot of people want to see, like, even if people have moved on to other platforms, like, how did you get to where you were when you were back in the Mitsubishi days? So I think this would be a great first podcast of that sort of style.
Okay, well, let's jump into it.
All right, so long ago, you said back in 07, what is it that got you into the Mitsubishi community?
My life started with a third-gen Eclipse, believe it or not, coming out of high school. I wanted a 2G Talon all-wheel drive, 2GB, and this old lady wouldn't sell it to me, and I ended up with a third-gen 4G64 manual, and originally I had a system in it, and I was slow, and basically from there, I sold my system and bought a nitrous kit, and that was pretty much where things started to get out of hand, I guess.
You admitted to having a 3G on the internet. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, 4G64, 75 shot of nitrous. I was, 17, 18 years old. That nitrous kit was armed 24/7 because the car was just so slow without it.
Heck yeah. I actually hate to admit this. My first actual Mitsubishi was also a 3G as well.
Yeah.
So I feel your pain there. 4G64 as well. I had the automatic with the slap shift. I thought was the coolest thing ever. Basically a ratchet shifter in those days.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can at least say it was a manual, so
yeah,
I get
got that going
a fraction
for you.
of a cool point.
Yeah, for sure.
So that car got wrecked and totaled, and then I was using so much nitrous. My local guy was like, "Dude, you're going through the bottle," and I'm a broke college kid, so that's what led me kind of into the turbo world, because that was like the party all the time. I wasn't constantly going asking someone to fill a bottle, so.
And refilling those nitrous bottles is expensive.
Yeah, even back then. But when you're working a job making, God, I don't even remember how much money I made back then, like whatever minimum wage was.
Yeah,
literally living with my parents.
Something.
Yeah, like living with my parents, spending every dollar I could to spray a poor little 4G64 with a 75 shot everywhere. It made like 224 horsepower. With the shot on it, so bad times. Wrecked that, got a turbo MR2, wrecked that as well.
Oh, wow.
And then, so that was like, I spent my insurance money, and this will really date. A turbo MR2 was $7,000 back then, which is a lot of money. Now you'd be lucky to find one for $7,000, I think. Once that was totaled, I only had $2,500. And I was looking at a Civic hatch, a D-Series Civic hatch with a cheap turbo kit on it, or a buddy of mine who had the baddest import in town, which happened to be a 1GA manual car as well. He knew of a Talon for cheap, and he told me he'd help me. So I spent my $2,500, and I got a 1G. I drove it to the DMV, and it had so many vacuum leaks. Like, you basically had to ride the clutch and the gas everywhere because the car would just stall out. So, like, I could barely drive it, but man, I was pumped to get into a turbo all-wheel drive car.
Heck yeah, you're on top of the world at that point.
Yeah, everything on it was so sloppy, but yeah, I mean, it was just like it made all the right noises. So, young kid, turbo all-wheel drive car. I mean, you feel pretty cool.
Right. Would you say that car sparked your love for cars, or was it long before that even?
It kind of started. So I graduated high school in '05. I never was into like Fast and Furious, but that group of guys was probably alive and well. And the car scene was like a way for you to be like cool and respected, I'd say. Like, wasn't the biggest kid or athlete or whatever, but if you're into cars, there was like a group of guys that like were there. So like that kind of started it. My dad always traded like leased cars, nothing special, but interested in cars. And then, once you got it and you had like a group of friends that were into cars, I don't know, everything just kind of falls together in that world. I don't know if you had something similar like that.
For sure. Yeah. Yep, definitely.
Yeah, so definitely got started in that, and like the subs were cool in the day, and the body kits. My third gen embarrassingly had a body kit, but once I felt like the power and that adrenaline rush, man, it was like, it's a slippery slope. I've spent a ton of money on the DSM. That 1G started with a 17C on it, if people remember that.
Oh, the old box truck turbo.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, that's what it was. It was a 17C, and it was like, I thought it was cool because it wasn't, a 14B at the time. Like, yeah, I got the big turbo upgrade.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of started, and then I'm driving that to college, which I'm daily driving a DSM. If you've been around, that's probably not the smartest move, especially as a broke kid, because a lot of things need addressed. Blew a head gasket, or maybe it spun a bearing. I don't even remember. I got my parents to loan me some money for a 2.3 stroker.
Oh, wow.
From a random dude on the internet. That blew up in my face. That engine, I was probably already bad. So like I was off to a bad start with my luck here in the DSM world. So that didn't work out. A buddy ended up taking the car and was going to put just rod and piston 2-liter in it. And the car had sat for a while through college, trying to come up with money. My parents were obviously not happy that I'm throwing money at this old car, but I loved it at that point. Like it was like the DSM personality kind of started. The first shootout I went to was in '07.
Oh.
And I went back in like '08, '09. And once you go to the shootout, like especially in the old days, like everybody knew each other on the forums. We're all from all over, and we'd all meet at the shootout, and it was just like a giant party for just car guys. So, at that point it was like, I'll figure out working overtime or whatever it takes to stay in with the guys. So going up there for years, and then like, man, I put a 50 trim on the car, which again, in those days, a 50 trim, I mean, I don't even know what size the compressor wheel was, but it's like,
that was
50
huge.
trim or 60. Like everyone thought it was like the coolest.
Yeah.
And my buddy had a 30R, which was like, that was race car world. And I think I blew the seal on the turbo. I remember having like a bunch of oil in the compressor housing. So then this story just is like me replacing stuff, and then it ends up spending more money. So like I replaced the 50 trim, and then I ended up with a 35R because I had to one up my buddy and be the big shot, So then I had the car with a 35R with the DSM housing. So it was like an FP manifold.
Okay.
A 35R. Man,
are you still detailing
parts.
it at this point?
No, I have a Volkswagen Rabbit that I have to daily because the car couldn't do it, and I had to go to college. Like that was like the deal with my parents was you got to finish school. So I'm going to college. I'm working at like GameStop and Hat World and wherever, and then taking all my money from work, and it's literally just getting dumped into this car on like one thing after another. And I'm young, so I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's just a crapshoot of parts getting thrown into the car.
Just reading stuff on the forums.
Yeah, like I think the Busher forums were big, and DSM tuners and DSM talk, and I'm trying to think because I made some bad decisions too. Like I bought a Gretty E-Manage because that was like, I don't know what another RX-8 Turbo RX-8 guy had, and I was like, oh, I'll get an E-Manage and he'll know how to tune it. That was a giant disaster. I'll give a shout out to Pete Cardo. I haven't talked to him in a while, but back in the day, I had no money, and this guy's like, I'll trade you. I think he traded me like a catback exhaust or a turbo back exhaust. This intake manifold is like a homemade intake manifold, and he might have got me an EEPROM ECU, and that's when I got Link and like the 35R setup. So the world was kind of turning around. It really started out with people being like really nice and helpful. So I feel like that's kind of the story along the way, is like, if you're not that egocentric guy like blowing smoke on the internet, like the DSM group was just a bunch of helpful people. So kind of start getting some parts together and driving the car. I do remember driving the car. So I drive it to college, and then I drive from there like 30, 45 minutes back to the mall that I worked at. And a buddy had just finished the car, so it was running. It was a rod and piston 2-liter, and I'm getting on the highway, and I remember getting out of like math class, and I told him, I was like, I want to do a pool, like at least getting on the on-ramp, like just a baby pool. And he's like, all right, man, like go for it. And the car died on the highway, and I didn't know what happened. You know, we thought something goofy.
Yeah.
We get it back, and we had to jump the battery to get it to start, and then we thought it was a top-end noise, but I spun a bearing.
Oh,
and
geez.
Yeah, so like bad news strikes again, and the worst news is I'm still completely broke. So I told him, I was like, hey, like I think this is the end of my DSM days. I can't do this. Like I don't have the money. I love the car, but I just can't afford it anymore. And Sam DiMartino is the guy that was helping me. He goes, look, I know you love the cars. I'll make you a deal. If you buy the parts and you're willing to come up to the house and learn how to work on it, because I knew nothing too. Like my dad wasn't a mechanic. I don't have any background, and I just love cars and turbos and that world. So I have no clue how to do anything. Like I think I changed a radiator and spark plugs. Like that's as extensive as it got. So he's like, if you get the parts, if you can figure out a way to get the money together to get the parts, and you're willing to come up here and put the time in and learn how to work on it, I think you can keep this car. And man, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'm definitely in. So I end up spending like all my free time up there after work is putting that car back together, and getting that done. So I think I'm probably skipping around in the story, but some of this is maybe important.
I mean, basically got a race car at this point.
Yeah, so he gets the car back together, and then it's reliable. Like it would drive around, and Sam was tuning it on Link. We went to the dyno. They had a dyno day in Kentucky, and it was like a just show up and you don't have time to really tune it or anything, just strap down type of day, like a regular dyno day. So we rolled up. The car made 450 to the tire, and we literally had just been tinkering. But like 450 back in, this is probably like 08, 09.
Oh, geez.
So like, I felt pretty awesome. We had done the deal. So it was a 2-wheel drive dyno. So we had done the deal with I had the welded center diff, and then we had the dummy axles in the front.
Oh,
so
yeah.
The car was rear wheel drive. And I thought that was like the coolest thing too, is like I'm driving a rear wheel drive Talon. So I think there's videos on YouTube of it dynoing rear wheel drive. One time it dynoed front wheel drive. So it was just,
That's sick.
yeah, like you felt like you were the coolest kid in town because you're like, oh yeah, it's rear wheel drive, and that thing would just light the tires up.
That's badass.
Yeah, so then like that went from like a comp stage 4 clutch. I obviously burnt that up immediately. We start turning the boost up, and then I'm driving the car on weekends, and we end up putting a twin disc in it. So like I'm cruising around with a twin disc back in like 2010 or 2011.
Jeez.
Drove that for a while, and then I really went to like the 35R ends up going out the window, and we put I think it was a 67 65, I want to say.
Wow.
So Sam made a forward-facing turbo header. So the turbo is in the front. I cut part of the little 1GA, like the little turn signal piece that goes in front of the flip up. We cut that out for an intake. And then like whatever era this was, everybody was doing the forward-facing turbo setup. So, or trying to. There wasn't like kits necessarily, except for Evo guys. So we did that, and then I was street driving the car. Again, it made 707 to the tire back then.
Holy cow.
And I'm driving around everywhere again with the twin disc. And it's getting to the point where like I really should have not have been driving it. The car was like. You rip on it, and it's just like crab walking all over the road back and forth.
Wow.
And the only people that wanted to race was like crotch rockets. It just had got to that point where the car was just stupid. But it was awesome because not a lot of import guys had anything close to that.
Yeah.
Few people called me out like hot shots, but you know, the DSM was like king of the street. So you had me, and then the guy that got me into it, he had a 1G hitting hard. So like the DSMs were like running the town as far as the imports went.
That's so badass.
Yeah. From there though, so like my most watched video is on YouTube. It's 700 horsepower DSM brakes, got like 81,000 views. I sheared every tooth off of third gear, and the teeth dropped down or whatever, and it took out fourth gear, and it took out the center diff. It blew a hole in the case. Like that was that. And the car had gotten to the point where I wasn't going to street drive it anymore because I was only crotch rockets wanted to race, and I was being stupid. I'd gotten a big boy job. I graduated college in 2009. So wow, I'm trying to think of where I was on this timeline, but it was, you know, mid 2000s, I guess. The car had gotten to the point of like race car at 700 horsepower. So the auto DSM world was like starting to pick up. So we did an auto swap in the 1G. And that was a whole nother ride of didn't know what we were getting into or doing. I think we burned a converter up immediately. Like the trans, I want to say, it was like stuck in third gear, and I didn't know, and cooked the fluid and, you know, burn up a converter.
Gotta love it.
Fixed all of that, and then started racing the 1G more seriously. Like got a real job, bought a truck, got a trailer.
Yeah.
You know, back into the race car world.
So how did you feel making that swap from manual to auto? Because I remember back in the day, people were like, auto? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think this was the time where a couple cars had proven that the autos weren't to be thrown away. Because there was like that whole period in the DSM world where like dudes would buy a car and then throw the auto in the trash because nobody wanted it.
Right.
So I think there was a couple people that had got that game started. I'm trying to remember who was even. I know Aaron Gregory was like just getting started in that, like in the auto stuff. I'm trying to remember some of the other names that were involved. But Aaron was in Kentucky, so like I'd run into him at besides the shootout, I think at like an IFO and some different stuff. But you kind of had seen the proof that you could do it. So, and at that point too, my buddies were razzing me like, "Oh, you can't shift good, or you're not shifting fast enough." So I was like, well, let's just take that out of the equation. I'm not going to be razzed by everybody on the forums. I'll just put an auto in, and you can't blame me anymore.
Yeah. It's like getting harassed for my shifting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't matter like how fast you are. Somebody's like, "Oh, you can't shift as good as my buddy's cousin and his Mustang," and it's like, all right, bro. So they putting the ratchet shifter in and calling it a day.
So what's the 1G looking like at this point? How do we, where does it go from here after it's a full-on race car?
So Sam convinced Sam to put a cage in it. So now it's got a 6-point cage. It gets a full build. It's got the forward-facing turbo. It's got the auto in it. The last I remember, I have a video of it going in the 8th. Like it went like 690s. I went to a couple arm drops, and like I remember putting a big block Camaro back on the trailer. That was like, that might have actually been the Mirage. I might be lying. But I remember racing that with the auto. It got into the 650 zone, and like I felt like king of the world. But then we were getting to the point where the car didn't have enough cage, and putting a cage in a car is just a pain. Like Sam didn't want to weld another one in because back or something, and it is a lot of work. And Ryan Pelletier posted the Evo 3 converted or Evo 1 converted Mirage up from like New England DSM guy, friends with Kevin Jewer and all them. He posted this Evo swap, and I was like, man, what a sick car. So the 1G got maybe a little bit more time after all these setups, and I'm starting to make progress, and I probably should have kept going, but we figured the cage was at its limit, and this car popped up, and I liked doing like oddball stuff. So some of the turbo setup was wanting it unique and, trying to do something different. And then that car popped up. So I was like, I have to have this.
So then this Mirage / Evo was kind of the future home of all of your 1G parts?
Yeah. So probably like most people is like the car comes up, I find a way to get the money, or I have the money, and like I rent a U-Haul, and I convince a buddy last minute to go, and we drive. God, I don't remember. It must have been 18, 19 hours or something. We drive to go get this car with a U-Haul. I think I had my Trailblazer at that point. It's like we're going up there. I don't even remember if we slept in the car or if we got a hotel, but it's like one of those deals, like still broke kid, still doing dumb stuff with my money.
Roughing it.
Yeah, we go and get that car and drag it home, and the circle track guy is going to buy my shell, and rest in peace to that 1G. It probably shouldn't have seen that happen, but it had some rust and some other stuff, whatever it needed to convince me to, spend more money and do dumb stuff.
So after you get this Mirage, what is it? Is it a roller? Is it a full-on ready to race?
So the Mirage is a roller, nothing in it. So Ryan had bought the Mirage, and from my understanding, he was in the military and was deployed overseas, and he brought all this Evo stuff, like all the body panels, the subframes. Like he brought everything back to the U.S. and put it on this car. And he ran it as a true Evo manual car. And I believe he decided to sell it. And I think he did a Mustang. He had a 4G Mustang. So I bought the car and then put all the auto stuff in it. So I had to fab up like the north-south bar and the trans mount for the 2G auto trans I had in it. So that built 2-liter. The 67, 65, I think, made its way to the Mirage. If not, I know I put an FP Super 99 was like the final iteration of the turbo on the car.
Oh,
so it might have just started the Super 99, which was like the baddest thing on the block. Like everybody wanted an FP setup, and the Super 99s, what like Emery, like STM, and some of those guys were all running. They were just like cramming boost down its throat. So like I had to have it, obviously. So it had the auto, and then I switched from DSM Link, I think because of something with the nitrous and the two-step. I don't remember if it couldn't cut ignition or it did something weird where it like nitrous backfire. So I put on AEM V1.
Oh.
Believe it or not. Yeah, AEM V1 is all that poor car ever saw for tuning.
Wow.
So, the setup was pretty simple. It was a 2-liter rod and piston setup, some GSC cams, Kigley beehives, HLA, like all the Kigley goodies, the Kigley clutch packs. It had a shift kit in it. It had a Sinister converter, if you remember that time period in the DSM world. So it had the Sinister converter at one point, and then I went to the Jeff Bush Rise came with the purple precision converter. It switched to that at one point.
Oh, okay.
But it was basically just clutch packs and a shift kit in the trans. I had a stock auto transfer case with a frontline fab brace on it. We put probably a dumb move, but we took the Evo rear end out because we didn't know if we could move the ring and pinion over for the auto. So we modified the subframe to fit the 1G 4-bolt rear into the car. So it was a 4-bolt rear, and we spaced it to where the Evo 3 axles they're all the same spline. So the Evo 3 axles were in the auto rear diff. I think the 1G axles might have worked in the front. Kind of a hodgepodge there to make some of this work. But yeah, I was running, so it was like a 60 shot of nitrous just to spool the car. We had the issues where everybody, like, we weren't doing the second gear leaves yet, so everyone was leaving in first. So you had to battle the brakes being warmed up to where you could like hold the car back at the line.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with that setup. So half of it, I think we were launching. We'd get up on the 2-step, and then the nitrous would disengage so we wouldn't push through the brakes, and then would pick back up through the 60-foot and then shut off again to get through the quarter.
Okay.
AEM V1. So I don't know how good the tech was back in the day, but that's kind of what we were working with.
After getting this car all together, you obviously you'd ran 650s with your 1G. Is that where this goal was, just to get back to those 650s with this car?
Yeah, it was like, let's get back to where we were. And then I was getting more serious about racing. I don't know. I just wanted to compete at IFO. So like, I never planned on like the car has to do this or that, or the car needs, like, even through the Talon time, I think it was more or less like, if something breaks, you have to buy an upgrade. Like that dumb rule we've probably all done. Like, well, it broke, so now you have to buy something better. So doing that, and then starting to compete at like IFO, and then the shootout was the big thing, was like going and hanging out with the buddies at the shootout. I remember multiple times, like, you get the car to the shootout, and we were trying to figure the auto stuff out too. Sorry to backtrack, but I remember going up there, and like Brian Erb, I don't know if you remember him, but he did some fab work, and he was kind of like an auto guru back then. But like pulling the trans at the shootout, having him go through the the valve body and like going through that. So like we're kind of like slowly figuring out the auto game. And then the Mirage was like, okay, you've got a cage, the car's a bit lighter, the material between a 1G and a Mirage is like, it's night and day. I don't know if you've ever cut into metal on either of the cars.
No.
So like the firewall on the 1G, it's like two pieces. There's a piece of metal and there's like some foam, I guess, for like to quiet stuff down, and then another piece of metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Mirage is literally just one thin sheet of metal. So like it was just the Mirage was definitely the more eco box, crank windows, definitely eco box, a lighter weight. So the goal was to get that thing to be like, one, it was super unique because there's not a lot of early Evo cars running around back then with that look. So getting that car and trying to knock some time off. I think I remember like a shootout trying to figure out nitrous. Like I think there was a video of a pass and the car runs like a 13 at like 130 miles an hour because it wouldn't like spool up till the 8th mile. So it's just kind of like figuring stuff out as you go. The shootout was always like the fun time where like your car was never ready. You were never going to impress anybody, but like all the boys were going to be there. And if your stuff was not fixed or wasn't ready or you broke, it was mandatory that you spend the entire weekend like working on the car through all hours of the night.
Yeah.
Maybe half drunk. Like that was just the way the shootout went. So I think half the time, man, was just like, we got to get the car ready for the shootout. I don't even remember racing much in between, honestly.
I feel like that's how a lot of people are nowadays. Just race the shootout, put it back up, bring it back out for the shootout.
Yeah, man. It was like the family reunion. So like you'd get to see all the guys you BS with on the internet, and you get to like, you had to go, you had to bring the car no matter what, and there was going to be beer, food, and wrenching. Like that's it. That's how it went. So
if you're listening to this and your car's broken and that's why you're not bringing it to the shootout, just bring it to the shootout. And you're not going to find a higher concentration of experts on these cars than at the shootout. Just bring it.
Yeah, and they're going to make you work on it. And if you come to the shootout and you break your car, you're required to find the parts to fix it and spend the next 16 hours getting it ready to go get eliminated in Q1. But that doesn't matter.
The parts to fix it are in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. They're there. I think we did that. I mean, that was what happened last year when I went with Joe, was like, break something. It's like, I don't know if I want to work on it. It's like, we're at the shootout. This is not, there's no option. You have to work on it.
Yeah. After he put it in the sand, he was like, I think I'm done. No, come on.
Yeah. I remember I thought he blew the head gasket. And he's like, I really don't want to take the head off. And I was like, I do. So, and then you had like Wild Evo guys coming over. You've got, there's so many people coming through, and it's like, no one's going to let you not take this apart, right?
And Joe's vlogging on the picnic table while everybody's working on his car.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Like, I was like, you just have to check over whatever I do, but I can take these things apart. I can't promise it'll go back together right, but I can take it apart.
Yeah.
So, like, that's kind of the DSM shootout world. The car, we're just trying to figure it out. So the car was like 11 or 12 second car at the time because of the nitrous thing and not getting it to launch. I vaguely remember a Kentucky 8th mile event. And we convinced Aaron Gregory to go. And that was like, this was back again, forum days. And I don't remember if it was like a KY horsepower event or, one of those type of like small 8th mile things. Mm-hmm. And the Mustang guys are running their mouths, dude. Like, this is heyday of like import versus domestic. Yeah. I hated LS's. I hated Mustang guys. The DSMs had to show up. So like we convinced Aaron to come. It was like, well, if I can't clean up, I know who can. And his car was already a good bit faster than pretty much most of the people I knew, especially in small town Kentucky, West Virginia, where I'm from. So raced there. We actually got the car to leave. I want to say I broke a caliper. I had those I had like the lightweight brake kit on there with the scalloped rotors, and you had to put so much pressure. Like, you had to drag the brakes through the staging lanes the whole time to get them warmed up, and then you had to just absolutely cram on the brakes to leave in first. And somehow the caliper, I guess, the rotor had been like breaking down from me doing this however many times, and I crammed on the brakes, and the car did this weird shimmy at the line. I didn't think anything of it. And you know, probably like most guys, like once I'm going down track, I'm pretty much going to stay in it.
Yeah.
No matter what. So get to the end, and I pull off. Luckily, the brake caliper is hanging.
Oh my gosh.
And it's holding in the piece of the rotor, so it stopped the pistons from coming out and pushing fluid everywhere. So I was able to stop, get the car home, and have to fix that ordeal. That was like just weird early braking and DSM launching stuff. But the car went quicker, so we were like pretty excited for that. I think there's a video beating the Mustang guy, so like, you know, no trophies, no awards, but the car was doing what it needed to, type of deal. So like, these were the good times.
Came there and did what you came there to do.
Yeah, and if I didn't win, I know Aaron did, so that's all that mattered. Like, a DSM was cleaning up. I think everyone was in like shock and awe from like Aaron's car back then, just wiping people up.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by H-Tuning. They offer in-person and remote tuning services for all Mitsubishi models, from stock ECUs to standalone computers. With agents across Canada, Puerto Rico, and the U.S., there isn't a car they can't reach. You can find them on Facebook or Instagram at H-Tuning, or on WhatsApp 787-969-0046.
The last day, I remember, we go and test the car again, and we got it to launch hard, and it did like, this is embarrassing to like probably where people are now, but I think the car did like a low 1.4 60 foot, which was like good for me at the time. We were pulling like 1.6 1.7s. That's how bad it was to get out of the hole when we were, you know, operating with our setup.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we broke an axle, but we bent the metal on the subframe. We bent it, and it pulled an axle out of the diff. But we're like, who cares? Like, this is real progress. We've actually launched hard enough to break something. That's a feat. And then I think we went back to the shootout. I want to say it was the next time, no, I take that back. IFO Columbus was like the first test of the car. And this was like the first event that I basically got lucky, and the car started to make some like real progress. Between the shootout or the IFO, it's kind of hazy at this point, but the Mirage had gone from like 11-second car, and we skipped 10s completely. It just didn't even run a 10. It went earlier from like 11.50 to like a 9.50.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and I remember being in the car, and I was like, something's happening. Like, I felt like my organs are shifting, or something feels different. Like, that's crazy. So the car went and ran a 9 for the first time. So now I have a mid 9-second car, and we're trying to like plug away at that point of going a little bit quicker. And I want to say we're at the IFO, and I had no plans again. There was no thoughts of winning, especially when I tell you who was there. I'll never forget this. This is probably forgettable for the guys I'm going to name. But we're in FIP class at IFO, and I'm up against Aaron Gregory, Joel Granis with the white IRS Supra, Jared Early's there with the Conquest, the orange car.
Yep.
And I don't know who was in between, but basically, looking at the lineup, I was like, I have no business being here. I think I was telling people like in the staging lanes, like, we'll just go as many rounds as we can go. Like, who knows what'll happen? And it was one of those events where everything went wrong for everybody, and my car was just consistent enough in like the 930 range for me to end up winning. So like, Grannis's car was crazy, and the IRS was all over the track, and I can't remember if they broke something. I know I lined up against Aaron, and I think his car shut off at the lights, like right when he staged. It either, I don't know if it had a nitrous backfire or something weird happened. His car shut off, and I took off, and I'm like going down the track looking like, where the hell is he? And sure enough, he was obviously got the car back up, and it was so much faster. He was in the eights at that point, which was still pretty wild. I don't think anyone had gone sevens in a DSM, like an auto DSM anyway, at that point. And so his car was like a mid or low 8-second car, and I'm a 9-second car. And yeah, when I finished the line, I go across the line, he's flying by me. So I beat him by luck, and then I get Jared Early was up against me next, but he had broke the his throttle body, and it was one of those God, what were we all use? The Infinity, like the Q90 throttle body everyone was using.
Yep.
You remember those days?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think he had a Q90, and he broke the throttle body, and my buddy happened to have one. I was like, man, I don't think we should give this to you. Like, I got to race you, bro. Like, I don't know. So anyway, we gave him the Q90, and he gets his car ready, and we race each other. And he had another issue, and we won, basically. I don't remember if he was the finals. I feel like he was, but regardless, we won. So that was like, I think that's the only event I've probably won is IFO man. Columbus by pure luck against like, the names were so big in import racing that I remember all of them.
Because they're still big names.
Yeah, they are still big names. You know all those names I named. It's not like I named nobody's.
Right.
Like, you know Aaron, you know Jared. Everyone knows Joel Grannis. So, yeah, that was like, I'll be on my deathbed, and they're like, sure, Grandpa. I'm sure that was a big deal. But, yeah, at the time, like, felt like $1 million. I only won like $1,000 because of IFO, but felt like $1 million.
Hell yeah. So how did we get from that moment to this car breaking into the eights?
So that car on the last pass, we're running like 50 pounds of boost, spinning it to like 10,500. It blew a head gasket on the last pass. So I guess my luck was about to run out. And some things were going on back at home. So like I just got offered a job to move with my company. They were going to pay me to move to Florida. And I couldn't pass up the deal. So that was going to be, that's 2015 that I moved. They paid me. I came down here, and I know nobody because I just moved to Fort Myers. But if you're in the DSM community, you probably know somebody in Florida type of deal. So I moved, was like, hey, who do I know down here? And I had met Joe Bucci, Tom Noonan, Adriana. I met all of them at the shootout with the Mirage, and now I'm like 2 hours from them. So Joe ends up being like, he took me in like family. Like I was like one of the Bucci brothers right off the rip. So I was driving like 2 hours every weekend to go hang out with Joe and see what he was doing. The car was fast enough at that time to impress him and maybe some people in the auto game. So I remember getting the head resurfaced and putting the car back together. And then Sam was in West Virginia, and he was going to fly down with his family to help for this IFO at Bradenton, another FIP class. And so we get the car there. Sam comes. I think we've messed with the tune at that point. I think at one point Kevin Jewer looked at the tune. I feel like at some point in the DSM game, if you're pretty chill and nice to talk to, people are just willing to help you out. So I think Kevin had looked at the tune. I know he did at one point in its life, getting the car ready for that. And Joe came, Tom came, Richard Blyer, he came over from the East Coast. Like, everybody was kind of there. We do the first pass at Bradenton, and the car goes like probably another low 9.2 or 9.1 is kind of in that range.
Yeah.
And we were looking pretty good. At the first round, I was up against a 3S GTE Corolla, like manual car.
Okay.
And no, yeah. I was up against him. I did one qualifying pass, and things were fine in the 9. So then we gave it more and E1, and that was against that Corolla. And we beat him, and the car went an 890 something at like 155. And there is a video of that. You could hear Sam's like pumped because we'd been in the 9s, and we were just trying to just keep, pushing along and going around type of deal and trying to get competitive. So we did that, but it blew the head gasket again. Yeah, so we get back to the pits, and we've got all these experienced DSM guys. And we're like, all right, how do we make this work? But we blew the head gasket like big time. I want to say we took the spark plugs out, and we like turned it over, and it was shooting water out of the hole. So yeah, and the class was so small. They had just moved a guy from the front wheel drive class. They moved him to FIP because they didn't have enough turnout. And my car at the time was so fast. The guy with the Civic even came over. He's like, "Oh, congratulations on the win." He's like, "There's basically nothing I can do to beat this car. I run 9s or whatever." And I'm not going to tell him like, this thing's blown up. I won't be making it. So we were trying to figure out if we could like retorque the head studs or just anything to like, if we can get to the line, maybe we can play some games and he'll red light and we could just get a W.
Yeah.
But it was so bad, like we couldn't even get to the line.
Oh man, heartbreaker.
Yeah, and the crappy part is he had a bypass and he still red lit. So like if I could have just made it there, it was a possibility. So yeah, that was kind of the run up. I just dumped on you like 10 years of DSM stuff, but
I love it.
Yeah, that was the run up of that.
So what was the plans after running that 8 after that IFO event?
So, well, I'm trying to think what the plan was. At that point, I remember MitsuTimes was, you guys had I think the Facebook page for sure, and maybe the web page, because this is when I started feeling like I was pretty cool, Like,
yep. It started with an app.
Okay. Was there a page you could go to before to see everyone's times?
Yep. DSMtimes.org.
Okay, so that predated MitsuTimes?
Yep.
Okay, I think I was on that at one point, and it was like I was in the top 100, like fastest 4Gs. I was like 15 on the fastest autos, which I'm sure it's not that impressive probably to like the guys that are like fighting for 1 and 2, but for me it's like you shouldn't even be on the board. So you know what I mean? Like you're in the top 15, you feel awesome. And then I found out with like the Mirage group that I had the fastest Mirage. I think the guys were like, there was a big gap where the car had been 890, and I think like the next closest Mirage chassis, which I think this included like the CSMs, and I want to say mine was a 4th gen. It's like a 93 Mirage.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the fastest at the time, and then that record had sat for 3 years until Dan at TRC, when he bought the silver Colt and ran a 7.
The King Colt.
So he's the one who knocked my record off at that time. So, and then he knocked it off so bad, it was like, okay, you don't got a 7 in you, buddy. You just went 890. You've not, you know what I mean? Like, it's just you're fighting the brakes and you're doing all of this and that. And I think at that point I was just getting annoyed because couldn't cut a 60-foot. I remember talking to Vinny A, which I know a bunch of people know Vinny. He was big in the auto game, like waxing people in his street car. So like he was a big time guy. I remember messaging him about like a trans brake or something, like some of the crazy rumors you heard in the auto DSM world that things existed or didn't. So we were messing around with that, and he's like, no, it's not real. That doesn't exist. So that might have been the start of like the second gear leave might have been what was going on. But I just kind of got sick of fighting that. And the illness of where I like to be weird and unique continues on. And this green rear-wheel drive, like, I mean, I don't even know what you'd call it, like Pro Mod. It was literally a tube chassis car, and it had a Mirage Coupe body on it.
Oh, wow.
It just had surfaced in the middle of Florida. And I decided if I could go rear-wheel drive with a trans brake and like an 8.8 or a 9-inch or something, that all of my DSM axle braking, transfer case braking BS would go away. So it was like, let's make the jump to rear-wheel drive. So I called Joe Bucci up and was like, hey, do you want to make a trip to the middle of nowhere for a dumb idea? Lots of that going on along the way. So like I bought the rear-wheel drive car, brought it home. And I think the plan was to maybe put the Mirage back out all-wheel drive, and then start to convert to the rear-wheel drive, like bring the engine over. I bought a Power Glide from Danny and Jose Rivera. They had he's got a manual Starlet now with a 4G in it. It's pretty quick. They had a Glide at the time with the adapter plate, the Hinscher adapter plate to go rear-wheel drive. So like I'd started purchasing that stuff, and then I took the Mirage to get looked at, and the chassis guy was like, "We're gonna have to redo like a decent chunk of this car, basically. So, like, you may just want to start over." And I was like, "Dang, like." I really wanted to keep it at Mirage, and, you know, I want to go rear-wheel drive. So then it was like, I was debating buying a 2G. So I was like, maybe I'll buy a 2G in like a 420A car, so no one crucifies me for cutting it up. And I was thinking about cutting one of those up to make it rear-wheel drive. And then I got Danny. I think Danny called me and said he knows a guy that has an FC RX-7, and his son was like misbehaving, and he was selling the roller for $200.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was like, all right, we're back, boys. So I picked up the RX-7, and that was it did have a 4G in it. There's some pictures on the internet. It had a 4G in it and the Power Glide and like a Borg Warner 80. So I was going from the 72 to the 80 mil, and was going to try to get more serious. And that's probably like the end of me owning a DSM days.
Yeah. Okay. I don't remember the FC 4G63.
Yeah, it sat and it had some mock-up stuff. So like we had the engine was in it, the Glide was in it. Ricky Chassis did the car. You've probably seen it with the Barrett shoved in it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, same car.
Oh, okay. Same car. Okay.
Yeah, it was red, and then I wrapped it. So, but before that, it started with the 4G in it. Like the plan was, I love the 4G. They can make a ton of power. Let's just take all the Mitsubishi driveline out, and like the car's going to be stupid fast. Yeah, so that was kind of the end of that portion.
Okay. Well, Chris, if you could somehow get a time machine and go back and, maybe not get that Mirage and focus on your 1G, do you think you would start over and do that Mirage build still, or you think you would go back and do the 1G?
Oh, man, I think I've never been like sentimental towards cars. Like, a lot of guys have a story like, I got this in high school, or a family member gave it to them, or, one of those like real tied to the car. I was super tied into like weird, unique stuff. But if I could go back, I would 100% have kept my orange 1G, and I would still have it to this day. I definitely regret selling the 1G just because it's just a beautiful car, and it deserved much better than what I was doing.
Yeah. That little extra money for the cage might have been worth it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I had a carbon hatch and a carbon hood, and like, and it was just a pretty car. It was painted that like, it was that orange color that that Pontiac had from the like, I don't know if it was a Dakota or Grand Prix or something, but it was like a pretty orange color, and had some carbon goodies, and back when that stuff was first coming out. So like, I think I would have kept the 1G, and then like, if I were to tell myself I should probably still tell myself this, but keep it simple. So like, rather than me doing goofy, I want a forward facing turbo and I got to figure out how to shove all this crap in the car to make it look cool, would have been like, keep it basic, keep it maybe more bolt on, and then just enjoy the car. It would have been cheaper too, because I was changing setups constantly. So
that makes sense. So go ahead?
Oh no, I think we all a lot of us anyway, get kind of caught up in the, swapping setups and doing stuff. And I feel like that car, I should have just pushed what I had or started out smaller, but it was just such a weird, I guess it was like a weird time back then where I think the quick class was like, it was originally it was the quick the quick 16?
Yep.
Yeah. And then it got expanded to the 32. So like I was dead set on FIP and quick 16. And I think one of the slower classes and pushing a setup would have been a lot more interesting, especially once I talked to Joe and I saw some of the stuff like he had been doing on small frame turbos. And then Tom Noonan was doing like FP Black, FP Zero stuff.
Yep.
And that car was stupid. It made me feel stupid because I had this big turbo and then this guy was just crushing it. And it's like, I should have been doing like refining a setup and staying small and pushing something. And that'd be like my advice to myself. I'm trying to follow that now.
Yeah. That should be, what people nowadays need to do as well. I mean, I know you and I talked offline about this, but it's crazy how people nowadays go straight to a 62 instead of pushing those small turbos and having fun and learning that way.
Yeah, I think like everybody at the time was like, whatever the new hotness was, which I'm guilty because I've been looking at like the PTE next gen stuff, which is like, I don't know. I think that like the 80 mil is really like an 86 or something. They're just massive turbos. It's more power than I'll ever need. Just crazy stuff. And I feel like everyone gets kind of on that new hot trend. So like whatever the trendy turbo is or whatever the trendy setup is, like jump into that. And it's like, man, there's like tried and true bolt on stuff that you could really just go out and just run laps in the car and have a good time for a fraction of the money. And it's like, I wish I was smart enough to have learned that lesson.
Well, Chris, would you say that the IFO in Columbus was your favorite memory with the Mirage?
Yeah, definitely that. Or I did get second place in Bradenton, but that was pretty sweet because of the 8-second pass.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the 8-second pass definitely has like a spot in my heart. And I've never been as fast since. I've been like habitually changing setups and not following the advice I just gave. So there's been a lot of downtime in between. But yeah,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I think all those times of like, you could probably pick a random shootout and there wasn't a win or anything necessarily. I remember just racing different people and hanging out, and like those are probably my favorite times because it's more about the community and all the people you know.
Yeah.
I want to say Stephen Rocco. Remember he had a 2G auto, the white 2G. I got eliminated by him at a shootout, and I think he went on to win. Some people broke or got lucky type deal, and he went rounds and won. I remember losing that race, but nice guy. I ended up racing with him at FL2K recently in different cars, and it was pretty cool just to go back and be like, remember the old the DSM days? You know, it's always fun to just like just seeing those guys and getting to relive those days. I think after COVID too, getting locked down and not doing anything, I think a lot of us kind of, I don't know, I'm guilty of like locking myself away and not doing much. And this last shootout that I went to with Joe, he convinced me to go. That one's definitely going to be like an all-time memory for me. Mm-hmm. Figuring out a way to go and getting out of the house. Like I didn't even have a car, but pitting with him, working on the car, and spending that time together. Like I think a lot of us have some cool memories. So I guess my thing would be like any of these races, you don't even have to win. Just getting out with your friends, your family, like that to me is probably the stuff that means more than all the little bolt-on, crap I did on the car and the money spent.
Yeah. And not to be too cheesy, but I mean, you never know if that could be your last race with those guys. So you go out there and go to the shootout and have fun. I mean, for all you know, that could be your last shootout. So,
it could easily be. That was the conversation, that Joe and I had was, when Tom Noonan passed, that was a big hit to him. And he really wanted to get back out and do stuff. And like, we were talking about that because I had stopped doing much of anything really after the Mirage, and then I had some ups and downs with the new car and things breaking and all that good stuff. And it was like the motivation. He was motivating me to get back out and do something. So I think we should all probably take a minute and not take things for granted. You know what I mean? Get out and spend that time with friends or family. Spend that $20-$30 or spend that day when you're like, oh, it's too hot, I don't want to go. Like, you probably should go.
Yeah. Make it to the shootout no matter what. Your friends and family are there, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, man. I don't think there's ever been a shootout that I went to and was like, I regret doing that.
Yeah.
I know there's not.
Even when it was in August and it was scorching hot, I still had fun.
Yeah, I think that's when everyone's like, who's going to set a record? And it's like the DSM shootout has never been the record-setting event. It's hot as balls in August.
Weather
it's
doesn't
more
allow
like
for that.
Breakfast and hang out with the boys. But, yeah, there's never been a bad time.
Well, Chris, there's someone out there probably sitting on one of these Mirages. I know the 5th-gen Mirage has become super popular with the all-motor V6 guys lately. In your experience and, like you said, hodgepodging and mismatching these parts, what advice would you give somebody who's going down that road for a Mirage build so that they can be set up for success?
Man, I would say keep it simple. The 4G goes in. You could start out front-wheel drive with manual or auto. Start out in like FIS or something, and then as you build up some money or maybe you knock some stuff off, you can do all-wheel drive. I mean, there's guys doing rear-wheel drive if you want to get wild, but the Mirage is a good platform. The 4G fits. There's all the ECU support. Like, things are different. I would say just keep it simple, like we talked about.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I think even now we don't see very many Mirages out there racing, so it would be cool to see some more builds get done. I'm sure you could pick up a 4th gen Mirage these days pretty cheap.
Yeah, I bought a I guess it'd be a 5th gen, like a 2000. It had the Evo engine in it. It was Evo 4 swapped, all-wheel drive, crank walked. I bought that. It needed some work, and I kind of got in over my head and ended up getting rid of it. But I bought the Evo 4 parts and all of that. But there's obviously real Evos here now too. So I mean, if you don't even have to go the Mirage route. You can just skip the Evo world if you're feeling frisky.
Probably pay a little less in the long run, to be honest.
Honestly, I think you could probably get into. I don't know if I'd recommend an Evo 4. I think like a 1 through 3 is a pretty tempting offer.
Yeah. When they still have DSM engines.
Yeah. That Evo 4. I was told it crank walked, and I was like, "There's no way." And I was telling Joe, I was like, "There's no way it's crank walked." I was like, "I'm prying on the pulley right now. It's not moving." And then as soon as I took the serpentine belt off, the crank moved like half an inch. So I was like, "Okay, my bad. It did crank walk." That is still a thing.
So, Chris, you talked about it a little bit, but what are you building these days that's keeping you going?
So in the whole not listening to my own advice and being weird and unique, a Ford Barra showed up in Florida a few years back, and that's when I basically made the change from the Mitsu world into inline 6 world. So 4-liter inline 6 turbo setup, and there's a million videos on YouTube that we used to watch in the garage that kind of made me want it when it was affordable. So I now have a S197 Mustang with the Barra and a Power Glide in it.
Heck yeah. We're gonna. When is that going to be finished up?
Actually, I just got it back from For the Performance. Shout out to Jonathan, man. Those guys have taken really good care of me, and they're made the car exactly what I want. So I guess eventually I did take a little bit of my own advice. I did have the Barra in the RX-7, and that car was a lot of custom. Ford 9-inch, Power Glide, huge motor, tiny car. And it got to the point, went to the track on a stock engine, making 550 horsepower. It went a 950 on the second pass off the trailer. So,
no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. But I had a freak accident. The check ball for the fuel cell, if you roll it over, the check ball goes up and stops it from dumping fuel.
Yeah.
It came loose and went into the fuel feed line, and my ECU could not correct the fuel issue there at the end of the track, and I stayed in it with no safeties. So I guess it was missing, but I made a pass and blew it up. And then basically from there, a buddy of mine from Australia, this is kind of the funny part about the car community, people in Australia helping me out. When I moved in from West Virginia to Florida, I had all these DSM friends. So the car community is just something that, I don't know, it's just special. It's near and dear to my heart. The guy in Australia was looking at the tune, and he's like, "Man, if you could just leave better or leave harder, you need to make some adjustments to your suspension." And the suspension in the RX-7 was kind of unique. It wasn't a 4-link. It was, I don't even know what you call it. It wasn't a ladder bar. It wasn't 4-link. It was kind of meant to be a bolt-in ordeal, but I don't know if you'd call it that. It had a really good separation. But I decided I'm not a mechanic and I'm not a fabricator, and I really need to make things easier for myself. And also, no one considers the Bear an import. Like, everyone in the Bear world is Ford guys. So the RX-7 made no sense. So it's kind of that point where, what do you do? And an S197 popped up, and obviously, you see Brett's car. Those you can dial those into whatever you want to do. And the Mustang has all these bolt-on options for me to just put stuff in myself. So got into that, and that car is more of true to what I said. It's a bolt-on manifold. It's a exhaust and intake. It's a FP 7875 Power Glide Ford 9-inch. Simple, easy to work on. Some things that I still got out of hand. I did cut the front of the car off. There's a lot of room to work on it. So it's like a very simple car, but I'm hoping to pick up where the RX-7 left off, the 950.
Yeah.
And it went 950 at 15 pounds of boost. So, this should already be able to go into the 8s pretty quickly with the rear-wheel drive. So I've got Curtis Greenway out in Oklahoma is putting together an engine for me right now, and I should be getting that soon. The car's wired. It's ready as far as that goes. So when it comes in, a buddy and I are going to put the engine and converter and trans, all that good stuff back in it, and I should be racing hopefully this summer. Fall, if I'm lucky, I might be able to drag it up to the shootout.
Oh, that'd be cool. I know Mr. Briggs would love some competition in his Bear Mustang.
Yeah, I got to see him. I got to talk to him and see him last year at the shootout, and then I got to see a bunch of other people. It's like, all right, well, there's a Barra here. I can kind of justify that. And then I was trying to get a couple other Barra cars because a lot of them are up in the north, like Michigan, Illinois, like that area.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, maybe I can convince some Barra guys to show up, and we can all kind of goof off, and then these guys can be exposed to what a good community looks like. You know what I mean? Because I would like to replicate – I want to replicate the DSM shootout life into Barra life and get these guys like we're friends and family and that type of deal. So that's kind of my dream, is to sneak into the shootout with some of the other weird classes that have been allowed recently.
That's cool. Well, Chris, you talked a lot about your YouTube videos, and people can still see some of your old Mitsubishis racing. Where can people find and follow you on social media? Maybe somebody has a Mirage that they're building, they want to ask some questions.
Well, since we covered I covered, I'm sorry, I told you I'm a talker, so hopefully some other people get inspired to come flap their lips for a bit. My YouTube now is Jack Stan Barra.
Okay.
And I started a TikTok to try to, get on that trend with all the other hip youngsters. And it's Jack Stan Barra on there and Jack Stan _Barra on Instagram.
Okay.
And that's all Barra stuff. My DSM stuff, there's probably 3 different accounts that's spread out on it. I'd have to search to find you that. But if you type in 700 horsepower DSM brakes, you will find my 1G.
Okay. Easy enough. I think we can all do that.
Yeah, you can hear third gear leave the chat.
Well, Chris, you've been into this for a long time. You've met countless people. Is there anybody that you want to give a thanks or a shout out to for helping all your cars get to where they were, helping get you to where you are?
Oh man, there's just so many people that I feel like I will not do justice by forgetting to say their name. Gosh, Brian Erb back in the day, Pete Cardo helped giving me free parts because I was a broke kid. Sam DiMartino forced me into learning how to wrench. Alex Maynard, buddy of mine, helped me out, let me use his garage, stink up the place a few times with burnt ATF. Man, there's just a huge list. I will say in current times, there are some people I do want to thank in like the Barra community. Curtis Greenway, Dominator Australia, Chris Palfreyman is an Aussie. We've never met in person. He's helped tune the car, did my SBE tune. Nads at Fuel Tech, he helped me get the car started. So, I mean, there's just a bunch of people that have been involved around the way. There's so many people you could thank for a million things. Fernando at O-Star, he helped me out a lot along the way, give me some discounts, making me feel famous. Man, I could go on for 2 hours about people to thank, honestly.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad that you get a lot of people helping you out.
Yeah, I think that's like the one thing that will always just be like, the cars can fade, but you'll remember like this guy. It doesn't have to be a shop. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. But you could think back and there's probably a guy who helped you out or went out of his way or threw you a spare or just did you a solid. And I think that's kind of the stuff I would like to remember or like to highlight, where it's not just about being some, famous YouTuber, some shop for a shout out. Like, there's real, genuine, good people out there, super helpful. And I can't say enough about the car community. It's definitely changed my life.
Heck yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on here and taking a walk down memory lane with us. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for all you've done for the community over the years. I was going back, doing research for this podcast and was seeing all the stuff that you've been into, throughout, how beautiful that Mirage was, the 1G, even like you said, your 4G63 FC, which I saw it a lot with the Barra, but I didn't see it with the 4G. But, I mean, even stuff like that, that's so cool. And, I know there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it doesn't get appreciated by everyone, but I certainly appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, man. I don't know that I'm that interesting. I hope a lot of people, though, will get the courage to come on here and, like, tell some stories. And, even if it's not always you went and set a record, like, tell us your shootout experience. Tell us, like, how you guys figured out how to go faster or the things you broke or whatever. I think it's cool just to kind of take a trip down memory lane.
For sure. And, even when it comes to tech, there's somebody out there facing the same problem that you're facing right now. And, sharing your story on the podcast will probably open up their eyes to the same solution that you found.
Well, I don't know if I have any good solutions, but stick with it. And, there's good people out there. I will say that, if you're a humble guy and you're willing to listen, you would be surprised how many people are genuinely willing to help you with nothing in return. So I hope to hear more stories like that, more people just come and BS with you.
Me as well. Well, thanks again, Chris, and I hope to see you back at the track soon.
All right. We'll see you soon, man. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.